It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Yes, and here I am. And there, right there, is our very own producer, Jake. Welcome, fellow Quillers, to this very first live recording of Don't Quill the Messenger. We're so glad that you could join us, and we're happy that you are spending your time here with us this evening.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody.
You know, Jake, it blows my mind to think.
I'm sure it does.
It has.
Oh, sorry. I
right.
thought you were done. I thought you were finished. I thought the sentence was over.
It blows my mind to think. Yep. It blows my mind to think that it has been 6 full years that you and I have been doing this together, and that we've been bringing this show to our listeners every fortnight or so. We've missed sometimes here or there along the way, but on average, generally, this, of course, being 151 episodes at the end of 6 years, we've been pretty regular at keeping this thing going. And here we are embarking upon our 7th season.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to quantify 6 years of working on something. And we have a number. We could say, hey, 151 episodes. But when you think back at how many, think about how many hours you've got there. You could.
Do I have to?
You could start Don't Quill from the beginning and then listen to it for a week straight at this point with all the bonus stuff and some of those extra long 2.5 hour episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Suppose you could do the math. You're the engineer. You could do the math and figure out exactly how many hours of recording time we have amassed in that 6 years, 151 episodes, some extra episodes, and now 15 bonus episodes. I mean, I don't know what that amounts to numbers wise. I know you have prepared and are willing to share with the listeners during this episode where we are as far as the number of downloads that we have had over 6 years across platforms. And that's going to be a fun number to share with folks. But yeah, I don't remember. And then, of course, I don't know the amount of hours and that you put in every episode to prepare the visuals, the graphics, to do the editing, to clean up my weird coughs and noises and sneezes and stuff that happens. And then, of course, the hours of prep time that I do in reading authors' books and preparing for the episodes or the solo episodes, which require a certain amount of research and writing. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not certain, but it certainly is a labor of love. And we're so glad that we have a Quiller Nation out there who enjoys it and continues to enjoy it and continues to support it and keeps the series going.
Absolutely. And I mean, 6 years. It only took us 6 years to live stream. It's 2024, but not in Don't Quill. We still operate like it's the late 90s. And with that said, I want to say hi to those joining us via the live stream. It looks like we've got some familiar faces in there. I see Jen Swan is joining us. That's a name that I recognize from our patronage. And if you're listening to this after the fact, in the pod feed, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that they were doing this video. Well, you haven't been paying attention because it's all Steven's been talking about. But also head on over to patreon.com/Don't Quill the podcast. Sign up and make sure that you don't miss the next one, because we will do this again. I don't know that Indeed. It's going to, I doubt it'll take us another year. And also this will exist there as a live stream just on the Patreon, so you can go back and you can rewatch it as well.
That's excellent. And also, like you said, and those people who missed out on being here tonight, they are only going to get to watch it in the past tense and listen to it through the podcast when it is the 151 episode. And that's not till the January 20 4th release date. So
yeah, listen,
those of you who are here with us right now, you are making history with us, and we're so glad to have you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't believe it's been 6 years. I do feel like while it feels like time has gone very quick, I also feel like it's been forever since you would come over to the original Dragon's Den 1.0 in Burbank and have your guests come sit, and I would sit in the corner quietly and try not to interject, despite my nature to interrupt everybody speaking at all time, always. I feel like it's been a really long time since we did that. So it's weird to have those two things live in my brain simultaneously. One, we definitely haven't been doing this for 6 years. And two, that felt like 20 years ago that we were doing that.
And it does, but I also feel like I can remember vividly meeting you for the very first time in a hotel room in Oakland, California. Right. So, right. When all of this all started to fashion and come together, and you looked at me and said, you need to be the host of this podcast series and come to my home in Burbank and let's record episodes. And that's how it all started. It's kind of crazy how far we've gone. You've moved from coast to coast and back again since then. Sure. I've moved to Southern Oregon since then. Like, so much has changed, but so much has remained the same as far as the quality of the episodes that we produce and the quality of the guests that we've been able to coerce into joining us on the episodes, and the quality of the listeners who have, so many of them have been with us since the beginning, and so many of them who've been with us for a great deal of time since they first found us and joined. And then those who are fairly new, who have newly discovered us just in the last year and are now members of the Quiller Nation for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. And, we always say, especially when touting the Patreon and whatnot, that we couldn't do the program without the listeners. And I do think that the Quiller community is a really fun and unique community. I think it's definitely an eclectic community from my standpoint. The range of the Shakespeare diehards to the history diehards to the casual listener who are like kind of the people who represent my point of view when first discovering this, the authorship mystery. I feel like it's a nice eclectic group, and I'm happy that we get to put this show out.
Well, one of the things that we always do, those who have been around for several years, they know that our anniversary episodes are sort of a reflection back on the previous year. And we always love to share some reviews, some emails, some comments, things that listeners have shared with us over the previous year. We'll also be giving you a little bit of a preview into what this 7th season is going to include, and some of the guests that we're lining up to be a part of the 7th season, and future episodes that are in the works or in the queue. But Jake, another thing that we always do is without bogging down too much, we always try to share some statistics. I know one of the things that I've always been proud of is that we've got more than 140 different countries and regions where we have listeners that are regular listeners and listen throughout the years. Sometimes it may be only 5 people in Iran, for instance, which is still always puzzling to me that there are 5 people in Iran who listen to this series on a regular basis, which is great. Awesome. Welcome. I'm so glad that they are fellow Quillers. But also, I know that I've been trying to sort of keep track of some of the milestones when it comes to the number of downloads that we've seen over the years, and exactly where are we so far? Like, what is our total? How many people have listened to at least one episode?
We are currently at 145,076. So we're almost at a 150K milestone, which is really fun. And just to give you an idea, just January of this year, it's only the 14th. We're already at about 1,000. So we'll hit that milestone, I think, pretty quickly this upcoming year.
And we can ask you, members of the Quiller Nation, to help us hit that milestone. We're less than 5,000 downloads away from the 150,000 download mark. How can you help us achieve that mark? Share the podcast with other people. Send them a link. Send them a download to one of your favorite episodes, a link to one of your favorite episodes. Don't forget, if you are having trouble finding an episode, you can find all the episodes on our website, if not through any of your streaming providers. I find it on my Apple Podcasts, and the entire library is there. You can go through the entire library episodes on your Apple Podcasts and find your favorite episodes. And then there's an easy way to actually share a favorite episode with a friend or a family member. I have a cousin who lives in Atlanta, and he was just 2 days ago sent me a text message from the Shakespeare Tavern there. And I said, oh, we had artistic director Jeff Watkins on the series a year and a half or so ago. He was like, oh, send me a link to that episode. I don't know that I caught that one. I'd like to listen to that one. And it was so easy to do. I just like, do on my phone, boom, here it is. There it is right there. Find it. So that's super easy to do.
Also, I just want to speak to that because there was a change. I don't think this affected a lot of our viewers, but or listeners, I suppose, but it might have affected a few. So I just want to mention it, and that is that Google Podcasts shut down. We were available to Google Podcasts since the show's inception, but this past year, Google Podcasts closed, and they essentially migrated everything in the Google Podcast sphere to YouTube. So despite the fact that YouTube is a video service, much like you and I are live streaming right now via YouTube, essentially, all of our podcasts are now also hosted there. So you can find Dragon Wagon Radio on YouTube, and you can find the entire back catalog of our audio-only podcast, and it's just the episode art that it's a static image when you watch a YouTube video podcast. But I will say, despite the fact that it is primarily a video platform and they're just kind of integrating audio podcasts, it's been really great for finding new listeners and finding new people. And we get a lot of comments on YouTube videos that are like, oh, I didn't know this podcast existed. But because of YouTube's ability to very easily refer videos based on what you've watched in the past, like I think that's a space that's a little bit better than podcasts, because when you're listening to podcasts, you don't really tend to get a lot of suggestions of podcasts you might like in Apple Podcasts per se, but YouTube has that feature. And so it's been really nice to see people commenting on the entire catalog, because obviously since we migrated there in one fell swoop, the entire catalog got posted there in a day, and new episodes get posted as they come out. But we've received a lot of really fun comments. This one, just because it's a little bit relevant to what we're saying here.
Okay.
This one was from the episode "The Price of Authorship Studies," featuring Diana Price, who wrote Shakespeare's unorthodox biography. This person, Post Oak was their username, wrote, "It boggles the mind how few people have liked and commented on this podcast, at least on YouTube. Price's analysis will go down in history as a turning point for our understanding of Shakespeare." I love that. I just love that they're like, even people on YouTube, like, how are people not seeing this more? Well, share it.
Well, share it.
YouTube is a really easy way to do that too. YouTube is like, I mean, we've all shared a YouTube video. It takes 2 seconds. So that's another fun way now that, the podcast can just kind of, find a new audience.
Well, go figure. Thank you, Google. I never thought I would actually say that out loud.
Also, I'm sure that I don't know if you want to speak to this a little bit. Obviously, we had sort of a sad episode this year, of course, and that was remembering Alexander Waugh. And the Alexander Waugh episode on YouTube by far is the most popular. And I think it's because Alexander had such a presence on YouTube that people are finding that there are so many comments on that. In fact, literally just days ago, we had fresh comments to it. I want to read this one from Super Queen. I love YouTube handles. They're the best. Just wrote, such a lost. Always impressed by Alexander's way of approaching this minefield of the authorship question with sobriety and just facts. I admire his scientific articles, clear, full of deep information, and also readable for non-scholars. I hope he can now finally have a chat with DeVere and get all the answers. But yeah, I just love how many people are commenting and interacting on YouTube. So thanks to those of you who are doing that. And if you've been listening to this podcast all these years and you're like, I don't listen to podcasts, I watch YouTube videos instead. Well, good luck. Because now you can go find it on YouTube and listen to the entire show there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it does, like you said, it doesn't surprise me that would be a popular episode on YouTube because, as you say, YouTube has that feature of recommending other YouTube quote unquote videos. So if they found Alexander's YouTube channel, then it makes sense that it would then recommend to them, oh, well, if you're interested in this, you might also be interested in this. And
right.
So that makes total sense.
Right. We have a somebody watching. They don't have a name. It says unknown is the name of their name.
Unknown name,
which is funny because they wrote unknown. It doesn't say like no name or username. It just says unknown. So this was a decision on their YouTube. But watching live commented that they liked that it went to YouTube and they asked, will you be answering the comments best you can on past videos? I actually don't know that we're going to be able to do that in a broad sense. If something comes along and I see it, if it's something that I can respond to, obviously I will do the best I can. If not, I will pass it along to Steven. But there is a lot of monitoring that goes into making the show. So just to answer your question, unknown, we'll do the best we can. But if you truly have questions that you absolutely want to know the answer to, emailing is still the absolute best.
Absolutely. Contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. Contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. And some of you have hit me up recently and said, I sent you an email back in November and I haven't heard from you yet. Well, sometimes it does take me some time. Some of them I've saved for this broadcast and we'll be addressing them right now. Yeah, but I do always respond to every email one way or another. If you're somebody who emails me after every episode, I probably don't respond to every one of those emails. I probably collect a few and then say, hey, thanks for your encouragement, or thanks for continuing to support the program, or thanks for your criticisms. If it's something that is a specific point or criticism or a suggestion that I think is worthy, I often will mention it in an episode. And you've heard me mention emails that I receive from listeners all the time, either at the beginning of episodes, at the end of episodes. So yes, I pay attention and I do get to them. Sometimes I save them for a reason, especially when I know the anniversary show is coming. And that's what this show tends to be all about.
Speaking of a perfect segue, we actually have an email regarding the Alexander Waugh episode. So I figured let's just read this really quickly here. Also because there's an inquiry about your speech, and I really enjoy that personally.
Here we go.
This one comes from Catherine Sharp. It says, "Hi, Stephen. Thank you for your interview with Earl Showerman regarding Alexander Waugh. It is excellent. I appreciate your interviews, and hearing them makes any long ride in the car a pleasure. I hope you'll be able to interview Earl again soon about his own work, perhaps the teaching he has done with elder students, which I believe we ended up doing.
We did, yes.
Yeah, there we go. It's important, and few feel they can do it. Of course, his style would be hard to match. He's an enthusiasm pro and not getting any younger. Please don't wait." Well, we didn't. It happened.
We didn't wait, Catherine. No, that episode is in the books.
This was why the email stuck out to me. By the way, I'm curious about your pronunciation of impetus, which I believe you say impetus. They say it's a lovely word. You use it in office. Yeah, I've never heard it before with the middle syllable stressed. It's generally the first syllable, British English, impetus, I don't know, or no syllable stressed, those pesky American independents. I guess that's me, impetus, because I say impetus.
Impetus, yes.
That's how I say it. But I guess that is still the first syllable. Impetus is still the first syllable enunciated.
Yes, indeed.
So what is the no syllable stress version?
I'm not sure, but I do like to say impetus, because I believe in the Latin origins of the word. And also I feel like impetus sounds too much like impotent. And
okay, all right. That's interesting.
And I don't like how that sounds. And I don't think, and they certainly are not related words. They
No.
have nothing to do with each other. In fact, they're basically antonyms in some ways.
Is impotent with an O? IMPO?
Yes, but so I can have the impetus to fornicate, but I might be impotent and not be able to succeed. I don't know, but I like impetus because I believe that if you are impetuous,
all right, that makes sense.
Then that makes the most sense, right?
Catherine does go on to say, what is your thought about the word your impetus for your pronunciation, so to speak? And
well, there you go. I did explain that in an earlier episode, but here we are. We have touched on it again.
Thank you so much.
Because Jake loves to needle me, and he loves it when listeners criticize Steve.
Yeah, no, that's my favorite. Because I can't be the only one. Let's be honest. I need some teammates. Let's go to an email from July from Rich Wood. This is it says, "Dear Stephen, as you were rattling off some of the many slang variations on an eye for an eye, i.g. what goes around comes around, et cetera, I was chuckling to myself, wondering if you would go to FAFO. Do you know what FAFO stands for?
No.
I knew you wouldn't. I knew you wouldn't. All right. A trigger warning if those of you are bothered by foul language.
It has to include the F word, right?
Yes, it stands for fuck around and find out.
Oh, okay.
Which I don't know.
That sounds so right wing.
But I don't know that it's necessarily a version of an eye for an eye. Because an eye for an eye, like isn't there a moral message behind an eye for an eye?
Yes, it's biblical, right? It's Old Testament.
You have to finish saying it, and the world would be blind. What goes around comes around. I think that is a little bit, now that's the same thing as fuck around and find out. Essentially meaning like you're going to do something that you know is going to cause a problem. You're going to have a problem.
I get that, that makes sense.
Anyways, Rich goes on. In any event, your discussion of the legal, equitable, oh boy, you're going to make me pronounce some of these words. Jurisprudential? Is that how you say that?
Jurisprudential?
Probably. Themes in the play was excellent. I wish I knew which play he was referring to. This was from July. I don't know that helps.
That might be the Measure for Measure episode where I talk about the legal aspects of that play.
Okay. I studied some of this
material. That's my guess.
I studied some of this material 30 years ago in law school, and I've always found it fascinating. I wonder what you think about the many topical allusions in the play, specific to France circa 1580s. And he gave a couple links to view on YouTube as well.
Yes, that's definitely a Measure for Measure reference that he's making there. Yes, I remember that email.
Not all emails are sing your praises. And we're not afraid of those emails.
No, we're not. And we never have been. In fact, we prefer you definitely prefer some of those.
This one comes from Annie. I apologize. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. It's Boag. I want to say Bogue.
I would agree with that.
Boag. I read too many like fantasy novels and like play too many fantasy video games. I see Boag and it sounds like that's like Boag. That's like a warrior, Boag. It sounds like a Viking.
I don't know that Annie is wielding any two-handed battle swords,
we don't know.
Jake, but I think doesn't the email reference like putting down her paintbrush or something like that?
She does say I have just put down my paintbrush mid-podcast listen, but we don't know whether that paintbrush might have a blade taped to the side of it. You don't know. Based on what she's going to say, you better hope it doesn't. Stephen, how can you expect people to take you seriously and believe you when you have just come out with a stream of lies and gutter press gossip about the British royal family? If you spread malicious lies in the modern era, how can you be relied upon in the historical era? Prince Harry may be an idiot, but he is Charles's son. The red hair comes from the Spencers. Look at his nose and eyes and look at pictures of Prince Philip. He has not said Charles is not his father. You will have offended other British and Commonwealth listeners, not just me. I'm not sure if you are tired or distracted, but in this episode as well, you're trashing our royal family. You are not listening to your guest and you are talking over him. Not your usual high standard. A disappointed listener in England, Annie Bogue. As a fellow person who talks over everybody, I do think, Stephen, I can't join her crusade against you speaking over people because that's, pot meet kettle. I can't. I'm not legally allowed to join that crusade as a New Yorker who doesn't have the patience to hear the end of your sentence. Okay, but how do you feel about Annie's thoughts on your?
What did she call it? Gutter trash? What should call it? Gutter
press gossip. I think
gutter press gossip. Well, so here's the thing. What I would say is,
can we get? I'm sorry to interrupt. See what I just did? I do it.
See, you did. You talked right over me.
But only because I want to do a good job of sort of co-hosting for this episode and lay the groundwork. Some people have no idea what we're talking about. I believe in this episode you were alluding to the paternal history of Prince Harry.
Well, we were talking about the history of bastards in the royal family throughout the history of England, and there have been many. And in fact, in all of many of the noble families, there have been all kinds of bastards. And Shakespeare, of course, loves the term bastard and has a few of his own in the canon. It's quite possible that he himself believed that he was a bastard to some degree of some sort. And if you believe in the succession theory, then the Earl of Southampton was indeed a bastard in disguise. So that was the nature of the conversation. And I was using a modern topical reference, and the fact that Annie refers to it as gutter press only validates the fact that this is a rumor, that this has been gossip, as she calls it, almost ever since the boy was born. So it's not like I created or invented this thought that Prince Harry is not actually the son of Charles and could possibly be the son of some Air Force pilot that the Princess Diana had an affair with, and we know that that's a fact. She definitely had an affair with the man, so we can't say that she didn't sleep with the man. She did. The fact that he may have fathered her second son is something that has been speculated for decades. And then when you look at the way that Harry has treated Charles and the way he has treated his brother, it certainly lends more credibility to the idea that Harry doesn't. Here's the person who believes that Harry is not Charles' son more than anyone else. I believe it's Harry.
Really?
So there you go.
Interesting. All right. Well, listen, all I will say, Annie, on behalf of Stephen, I apologize if you were offended. And opinions are opinions. But also, if there's anything I learned from David Mitchell's books, it is that there are three kinds of Brits. There is the kind of Brit that don't you dare say anything that goes against any status quo of the royal family at all whatsoever. The royal family is the greatest gift to all of humanity. There is the type of Brit who does not give two shits about anything royal family. Say whatever you want. And then the third kind is say whatever you want, unless you're an American, then you can't say anything about the royal family. I know for a fact, those are the three different types of Brits. And there's a possibility that maybe, I don't know.
I'm sure Annie falls in one of those categories somewhere.
Probably.
Yes.
Here's another email. I don't have a date on this one. This was just in our sheet here. From Tanner McCardle again.
Yes, Tanner.
Pronouncing. Longtime listener, first time submitter. Firstly, thank you for the show. It provides a uniquely valuable type of educational entertainment. Oh, I love that they included the word entertainment in there. Or better, entertaining education. As soon as I am able, I plan on becoming a full supporting Patreon member. Until then, a support by word of mouth when and wherever possible. Secondly, the only guest host ever was, of course, your wife, Muse and Proxy Annie Sable. And I believe you were too sick to fulfill those duties. Thank you for your wonderful work you do.
I want to say thanks, Tanner, for the kind words. And we're so glad to have you as a fellow Quiller. And we're so glad that you are sharing the podcast with others. That said, the truth is, and Jake will remember this because it happened in Dragon Den 1.0 in Burbank, the first and only true guest host of the show was Patricia Corelli. Miss Patricia, who came to Jake's in-home studio, and she hosted the show and interviewed me,
right,
so to speak, as well as, I want to say there was another guest, wasn't there? But yeah, Patricia Corelli is truly the only person who has been a guest host of the show. My wife, I suppose, sort of counts.
You know, I'm going to take some personal offense to this as well. I feel like the anniversary episodes, I'm very much here and present. And also the first episode that myself and my significantly better half, Alexandra Hoy, appeared on was all about us, inquiring minds.
Yes, I remember that episode. So that's true. That's a good point.
All I'm saying is I need to be told I'm special every now and then. Okay.
There's a lot of gray area there then, Tanner. That's the bottom line is there's a lot of gray area because Jake is correct. Jake and Alexandra did host an episode where they then questioned me with their questions about the authorship mystery and why it mattered and why they should care. And I do remember that was like in the first season, I want to say.
Yeah, and I know I said this last anniversary episode, but this has been a very strange year with us traveling and everything that's gone on. Now that we are here, we're back home in Los Angeles, despite the fact that my beautiful city is on fire right now. Things should return to a somewhat more productive and normal state here. And so I do hope sometime this upcoming year, Steve, I would love to do another episode on you that acts as a sort of a new 101 where I can act as the uneducated, as I so often do and am.
You don't have to act, Jake. It comes natural.
Much. Appreciate that. Impetus. And so I do want to do sort of like an updated 101 that's like very, very broad that most of your listeners will likely tune out for, but maybe a very good on-ramp for those who maybe sometimes find the show a little bit inaccessible, because sometimes when you are with guests who are incredibly knowledgeable, you yourself being incredibly knowledgeable, you just dive in. And there's sometimes episodes where I know I have, as a listener, get lost in the first 10 minutes because I'm just like, oh, I don't know this historical fixture that they are taking for granted that I know. And then it's tough to follow from there. So I still want to do that. I still would love to do that this upcoming season. I think like a nice, fresh, 101 for dummies is a good idea.
I understand that sentiment and not a bad idea. Let's do it. We can make that happen. Maybe we'll do it live like this.
Well, I'm not the only one who has demands. Here's another email. From Quiller regular Jeanine Clark. That's a name I definitely recognize.
Yes, indeed.
I like that it starts. I don't even see if this one's from July. I don't know if there was anything that preceded this. If there was like a hi, Steven, or I had some thoughts. It literally starts with, I would love to hear interviews with the following people, Cowan. Like it's like just right to business.
I did put out a request. I asked listeners, please send me emails with ideas for guests that you would like to see, that you haven't seen, or guests that you would like to have returned to the program. And so I think Jeanine was responding to that.
Awesome. Okay, good. I like to think that Jeanine is just really proactive. She's just like, you know what? I want to be an associate producer. This is what I'm looking for out of you. Okay, so Ross Barber, David Shakespeare, who's a YouTube personality, Charles Veer Beauclerc, not sure how you pronounce that,
Beauclerc,
and Michael De La Hoyd, which they wrote again, which I'm assuming is a former and hopefully once again future guest. So we did Ross. We did have Ross on since July,
just in this last season, since July, yes. And David Shakespeare, unfortunately, has passed on, and we weren't able to get him on the program before he moved on to the other plane.
So sad.
Charles Beauclerc, he was scheduled to come be a guest, and it was all at the same time that his wife was having a baby, and there was a lot going on in his life, and I just haven't followed up with him since, and I need to. So in this coming year, I definitely will reach out to Charles. Obviously, Shakespeare's Lost Kingdom, fabulous book, and definitely an episode long overdue that we should have him on to discuss that fabulous book, and especially since it's been so long since the book was published, to get sort of a glimpse from him on how he feels about it now, all these years later, and how it's still being received. And then Michael Delahoyde, of course, we've had him on in the past, and he's been very, very active lately with the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship with some stuff that he's doing there. So you certainly can find him if you're interested in knowing what he's up to by going to their website and taking a look at some of the series that he's put together.
I also,
if you look on the shelf behind me here, there are several Delahoyde versions of Shakespeare's plays from an Oxfordian perspective. I think literally like right somewhere right in this area of the bookshelf.
Lovely. I also have a person that I'd love to attempt to get on the podcast. She is a host of a very popular podcast in the UK called Who Did What Now? Have you heard of Who Did What Now?
I have not.
Of course, I'm a bad producer here because I'm forgetting the host's name. But
have you heard what now about Who Did What Now?
She's a social scientist and an historian, and her podcast is all about myth truths throughout history. And I feel like the synergy between the two shows is it's there to be capitalized on. But I need to maybe send an email out her way and see if we can't get in touch with her. But anyways, I want to continue on with Jeanine's email here. I absolutely love the episodes where you just talk history. Some deep dive episodes about the people in court surrounding Oxford would be so cool. I love a good real life story. And then Jeanine goes on to give a bunch of examples of the sorts of characters she'd love to be explored, like Sir Walter Raleigh, Francis Stanley, William Stanley, Elizabeth Vere Stanley. Says, thank you for all the outstanding quality and for all your hard work.
Well, thank you, Jeanine. And the most recent episode is The Rise of the Tudors, where I do one of those deep dives into history, because I think it's important. If we want to understand the works of Shakespeare, we need to understand the Tudor dynasty. And in order to do that, I think it's important that we understand how the Tudors rose to power. And it's a really incredible sequence of events that should not have happened. It's almost miraculous that Henry Tudor, Earl of Richmond, became Henry VII and started that whole thing. It's pretty miraculous. And then when you think about how miraculous it is that Elizabeth becomes queen too, like that sequence of events with the death of her brother and the death of her sister, and the whole series of Tudors is kind of crazy in itself. You want to talk about divine intervention in some ways. It really smacks of that. So if you haven't listened to the latest episode, you really should, because I think you'll learn some really incredible things about Henry and how he came to power.
In fact, I wanted to speak a little bit here. I'm trying to find, I didn't leave like myself guides here on the content of each email here. But there has been a very lovely little outgoing of support for some of your solo episodes, some of your deep dives. And I feel like, as a producer, I think to myself, like, oh, Steve couldn't get a guest. Nobody likes him. He's forced to do the show on his own. But the reality is no, you have a little bit more time to really get into the weeds about a specific thing. And while I've always touted that I prefer a conversation over an oration, or I don't think that the occasional deep dive, well-researched, outing as you've had recently is a bad thing. And, you've been doing really great on those.
Well, thank you, Jake. And, you know for a fact, because we had this conversation years ago when I think the very first time when it was true, I didn't have a guest. A guest fell through. I had them lined up and then something happened and they fell through. And I was like, well, I need an episode. And so I did a solo episode. And I think that episode is actually like titled, Good without a guest is good alone, good enough, or something type of a thing. And I was very self-conscious about it because I was like, well, the audience, they want to hear a conversation. They want to feel like they're in the room with us while we're talking about these topics. But then the feedback has been so positive over the years when I have done solo episodes that I started scheduling them on purpose and started doing some on purpose. Like this Tudor one, for instance. I decided it was just really important for people to really understand how the Tudors came to power and why the succession of the Tudor dynasty was so important, because it was so new and because it had really salved the struggle between the two families of the Yorkists and the Lancastrians and the Wars of the Roses finally truly came to an end with Henry, and how it didn't last long, but how it was so important that when Elizabeth was aging, and this is what we'll get to, and I'll be doing another one all about Henry VIII, Henry VII's son, and so that you have a better understanding of like how it gets to become Elizabeth. But it didn't last very long. It's actually a very short dynasty. It was one of the most important dynasties in the history of the English crown, but it was very short. But you can understand that as Elizabeth was aging, there was this fear of a Yorkist coming to power again.
Right.
You could not have another Plantagenet on the throne. And so they didn't. They got a Stuart who technically is a Lancastrian, and we'll talk about that in future episode as we get to how the Jameses of Scotland are actually related to Henry VII.
Interesting. This email here from Ann Rutan. Hello, Stephen Sable. I just listened twice to your latest podcast, and I think it's brilliant. Thank you. I've listened to all the episodes and greatly enjoyed them. I've learned so much. As much as I enjoy your guests, I think your solo shows are actually my favorites.
Wow.
I'd love to hear more when you have time to do these obvious deep dives into research. Your delivery is so engaging, and the content just chock full of marvelous discoveries. Thank you again for making your podcast so wonderful. Yours, Ann, back in my home of New York City.
Oh, thank you, Anne. That's so kind and so generous of her to say. And I'm so glad. I'm glad listeners are enjoying some of those solo episodes. And yeah, I do. I get to do a real good deep dive. Turns out those episodes require a lot more work than preparing to have a guest.
Well, I mean,
by the way.
Well, I mean, a large part of what we tried to really form the show into was something a bit more casual than the what are most of the authorship material out there, which are kind of stuffy orations and very academic. We always wanted it to be just more of like, hey, let's just talk and find the information that we both know, and having experts on to share what they have. The whole point of that is you don't really need to do a bunch. You need to know your guests, but not what they know. And that's what makes for a good conversation. But when it's just you have to ensure that the listener can't stop you and ask a question. And so you have to cover your bases.
One of the things that I'm really proud of, and I get this from many of my guests that are authors, is I do prepare well for when I'm going to have a guest who's an author. I think it's important that I know their work, I know the book, I know details and specifics about it, so that we can have a real conversation about the book, about their work. And I've also been, I think listeners who have been paying attention, following the episodes of this last year, I sort of went on a mission to find authors who are focused on historical fiction, because I believe that that's a pathway to success for us as those of us who are super sleuths committed to solving this mystery. And I think that historical fiction is a pathway to opening the door to others to really examine what we know or what we think we know about the works of Shakespeare. And we've seen it in the past in other ways where historical fiction has really opened the door to people wanting to explore and examine more details about an era of history. And I think that that's a new avenue that hasn't been pursued enough as far as the Shakespeare authorship mystery.
I again, just speaking from my own experience, I don't know if you do this. I like to think most people do this, but maybe it's just Alexandra and I. Have you ever watched like a biopic? And then the second it's over,
I know exactly where you're going. While we're watching it, Annie and I sometimes while we're watching it.
Wait. Did that really happen? And you immediately, and you end up learning everything there is to know about everything. I remember when, because of Romeo plus Juliet, as I like to call it, Baz Luhrmann comes up on the podcast quite a bit. Baz Luhrmann's Elvis that just came out, what is it, a year and a half ago now, 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I remember watching that, and Elvis was just one of those artists that's just not on my radar. I didn't have a parent who was obsessed with him growing up. Like Elvis is just a name and some songs, but I didn't really know anything about the guy. Watched the Baz Luhrmann Elvis picture, and then immediately I'm just like, wait, is this real? And then the entire time we're like, wait, was the Colonel like this? Or, and you just dive into it, and it becomes like an obsession for like a week. And I think that, as silly as that is, it is a really great avenue into the authorship question.
Well, I remember when Annie and I first got into the show Vikings.
You talk so much about Vikings.
We started like totally rabbit holing the history of that. And I had no clue until watching that show that the Vikings actually sailed up the Seine to Paris. Like I was like, what? They really what? This is a real thing. Yeah, that was a real thing. I was like, wow, I didn't know their forays into the Mediterranean as much as they were. Like, I was shocked to learn some of the things I learned thanks to that show. And I have a episode idea that I've been working on to talk about like what we know about the Vikings now, as opposed to what we knew about them even just 100 years ago. And how our understanding of how far-reaching their conquests and explorations were, and how that has changed over the last century. And I feel there are parallels between that new understanding of them and the new understanding of the works of Shakespeare and the history behind the author known as Shakespeare. And so what I'm getting at is those paradigms can change.
Right.
Like it's pretty accepted now that the Vikings found their way to North America and were wandering around parts of North America and interacting with the Native Americans. And 100 years ago, you would have been called a psycho crazy person if you posited that theory.
Again, to bring everything back to mainstream media, as is my job. When they made Jurassic Park, dinosaurs didn't have feathers. Okay? We now know without any shadow of a doubt, dinosaurs had feathers. Okay? That was what, 23 years ago? 24? How long ago Jurassic Park came out? Sometime in the mid 90s?
Almost 35 years now, Jake.
No, 35 years?
1990 would be 35 years ago.
Jeez Louise. I refuse to accept. But anyway, see, that I refuse to accept.
Math is hard, I know.
Math is very hard. Well, speaking of the mainstream and of historical fiction, we have an email here from Dean Bradley from October of this past year. In this last episode, you opined for a best way to garner fuller attention for the authorship question was not by academic papers, but through a mainstream popular medium such as a Hollywood movie or a miniseries. They write, I have good news. Jodi Picoult, Picoult, if you'd like to Google, Picoult. Jodi Picoult is an American author who has sold over 40 million books that's been translated into 34 languages. Her latest title, By Any Other Name, is a fictional bodice ripper. I'm not sure what that means.
Bodice
ripper?
Bodice ripper. That's a romance novel slang term.
Gotcha.
Right. And you've seen some of those romance novels where the covers have, this long-haired, muscular guy who's got a hold of the woman around the waist and he's tearing at the strings of her bodice.
Yeah, I've done a lot of body modeling for those. So it's a fictional bodice ripper.
I'm doing the hair modeling. There you go.
Yeah, I had to cut mine off. I couldn't. I saw you and I went, oh, is that what it looks like? I gotta get rid of that. Wow. Anyway, he continues. So
harsh.
It posits that Amelia Bassano wrote Shakespeare under a pseudonym. I've never read a Jodi Picoult book before. I'm fairly sure I'm not her target audience, but I am listening to this one on audiobook because of the subject matter. I'm about a quarter of the way through, and all of the Elizabethan court are there. Leicester, Burleigh, Lord Chamberlain, Henson, Peregrine, Bertie, a gold-claffed Oxford at a jousting tournament, and a ravenous, lustful Southampton.
Awesome.
This is, as you say, far more catchy way of newcomers familiarizing themselves with the vast dramatis personae that acquaintance with the Shakespeare authorship requires. They go on to talk about, what would make for a good debate between this author and others. But yeah, I mean, that's anything that we have that, like you said, that draws more attention around even the players of the era
So I'll tell you, Dean, I did reach out to Jody and her people, and she's been super booked and super busy with the publicity junket promoting the book. But they did get back to me, and they did say that once the holidays are over, and now we're post holidays, and her scheduled appearances have sort of loosened up a bit, that I should reach back out. So I will be reaching back out to her in the coming weeks to see if we can't get her on as a guest.
I love that. Add it to the list.
Indeed.
This email really piqued my interest here, because I think of my preferred piece of language, and that this one comes from Jan Schaefer. Dear Stephen, what makes me wonder is why you use the term mystery. This is not because Ross Barber is a Marlovian, is it? At the New Orleans SOF conference last year, someone proposed to replace the term question in SAQ with issue, which to me seems more appropriate given the situation vis-a-vis Stratford. To use mystery is a step backwards. Best, Jan Schaefer.
So it could be Jan Schaefer?
Jan Schaefer, yes.
Possibly. I'm not certain.
Jan Schaefer, sorry, Jan.
But we started using the term mystery quite some time ago now. It's been a few seasons now.
I remember the shift, and I
the
think
swish.
The switch. Easy for me to say. And for me, it was because there was no question that Stratford was not William Shakespeare.
Correct.
The mystery was, who is William Shakespeare? And that is a mystery. It's not, to me, this argument is sort of semantical of like, it's an issue. The issue being we don't know who Shakespeare is. But I also think from an entertainment standpoint, you and I always talk about like, who doesn't love a mystery?
Correct. And I also believe that the great number of Quillers out there are mystery buffs, and they have become the super sleuths who want to solve this mystery one way or another. And I feel that a mystery is far more appealing than a question. Right. And if you look at mystery novels and murder mysteries and the mystery genre films, I think solving a mystery is far more intriguing and compelling than answering a question.
Cara Elizabeth Martin, who is, I believe, a 2-time 2024 Quiller of the Month, is in the chat and simply writes, "Mystery sounds fun." And I totally agree, Cara. Like, that is, mystery sounds fun.
Do we have any other questions or comments in the chat from those who have joined us live?
Unknown did specify Viking is the act, not the people.
Oh,
that okay. I wouldn't mind that being extrapolated on. Maybe not at this moment in time, but that piques my interest.
Okay, because there are the Danish and the Norwegians and the Swedes, right? Yeah, that all sort of committed Viking acts, I guess.
The Norse, if you will.
P.S. I don't know how they feel about that in Minnesota, except right now I bet they're willing to disown the Vikings because they got trounced by the Rams last night.
Listen, we have so little in Los Angeles. Give us what you can. Daniel Cowan is also in the chat and says, one of my favorite Don't Quill episodes was with Blair Murphy, mystical themes related to his interpretation of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yes, and we're going to have Blair on again this coming season because his film is completed now, and he has submitted it to several festivals, including the festival at Cannes.
Lovely.
And so we'll be hearing from Blair later on in the season about how that's going, how the film turned out, and what kind of reception it is receiving.
I don't know, Cara Elizabeth. I don't know whether or not we're supposed to be sharing this personal information or not, but whatever. We're gonna do it. Cara Elizabeth says, "Yeah, what happened to Blair Murphy? I think he bought a haunted house in my hometown of Johnstown, Pennsylvania."
He does. It's a haunted hotel, and yes, he owns it, and it's quite a tourist attraction. He has
Is this the gentleman with the Ouija board on the roof?
Yes, indeed. That's
Right.
the place. That's
Right.
exactly the place. The world's largest Ouija board. Yeah, Blair. In fact, I keep telling him, and once the weather changes into the late spring, early summer, I'm going to take a trip out there and check out his hotel and spend a few days with him. So maybe we'll do an episode live from his hotel.
Here's another email. We're going to go back. I'm just going to, only because I pick on you a lot and I want to give you your flowers when we can. So this one's from just last month of December, back about your solo episodes. Comes from Ron Roffel. Hi, Stephen. Hope you heard the standing ovation I gave you after listening to episode 148. It's a superb one-man show. Keep up the great work. Looking forward to the next episode and a great 2025. Yes, I am hopeful saner heads will prevail in your country. Oh, boy. Have a joyous holiday season and a happy new year, Ron Raffle. That's really lovely, Ron.
He's a Canadian.
148.
So I think he's afraid they're about to become annexed or something, right? Isn't that the plan? Canada's going to become the 51st state.
Can they just take Washington, Oregon, and California, please? Can we go the other way with this?
I don't know.
I love hockey. Let me just say, hockey's my sport. Okay?
It's because you're from New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody in California likes hockey.
I also love Tim Hortons. So listen, and poutine.
But thank you, Ron, for the kind
beautiful
words. That's really kind. Thank you.
You want to? We have so many emails. I don't think we have time to get through them all. We've already been going for quite a while, and I don't know how much people find this interesting.
One thing, Jake, I would like to do is you mentioned that Kara was a 2-time Cooler of the Month. For the year of 2024. Were there any other 2-time winners?
Let me look at all of our Quiller of the Months for the year. Let's see here. For 2024, it looks like, oh man, you're going to make me do a very quick glance here. I wasn't prepared for this. Well, why don't I just read them all? January, starting in January, we had Clare, Jaget, which I never got clarification on the pronunciation of Claire's last name. Clare. Jaget.
Yes, Jaget.
Clare, Jaget, John
Creider. That's Quiller Clare.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We've just come to know her as Quiller Clare, so their last names. John Creider, Ina Chu or Ku. I'm not sure how you pronounce that one either. It's just C-U. Cara Elizabeth Martin, April. Jen Swan, Jeanine Clark, Frank Lawler, Stephen Hopkins, Teacher Mallory. In October, unfortunately, we missed September. We apologize, everybody. That was my travel month. Edward Henke, Cara Elizabeth Martin again, Stephen Hopkins. So I think Stephen Hopkins was a 2-time based on that. And I think only Cara Elizabeth were our only 2 times for that year, which just goes to show you, patrons, there's no limit to how many times you can win. In fact, do you want to know who has the most winning Quiller of the Month of all time?
Sure, who?
Frank Lawler.
Really?
The only Quiller who has 3 Quiller of the Month victories. There is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-way tie for the second place of people who have had it twice. 8 people have had Quiller of the Month twice since we've started doing Quiller of the Months. But Frank Lawler is out front with 3.
Well, congratulations, Frank.
Once again, just goes to show you there's no amount, there's no limit.
It also goes to show you how random the wheel of destiny is, because you could win it 2 months in a row, even the way that the wheel spins. So how do you become a Quiller of the Month? Well, you have to be a Patreon patron, and you have to be so at the serial Quiller level or above.
Daniel Cowan in the chat says, are you still planning to do an interview with Glenn Alexander? I got a copy of his book, haven't read it yet, but his videos are interesting. Was looking forward to that interview.
I'll have to look into that, Daniel, and I'll see what I can figure out. Thanks for the inquiry.
Well, we've been reading a lot of emails, and there are still, we have barely scratched the surface here, but this is what happens when you put 2 people who yap on and give them a task of reading. But we also have podcast reviews and talkbacks via different podcast platforms. I mentioned YouTube earlier. Excuse me. But as always, the best way to review the program is on Apple Podcasts. I know that podcasts are available in a million different places, but Apple is still at the forefront of podcasts finding new listenership. And so the best way to support the show without opening your wallet at all, without barely raising a finger, is by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. I want to read some of the podcast reviews we've got in 2024.
Okay, because most of the emails I've seen, and I wasn't sure which ones you were going to pick and read, but the reviews, oftentimes I haven't quite tuned into those yet or taken a look at them yet, but mainly too because it's a actor thing. You don't want to read the critics, but Jake loves it.
Well, they're all good except for one.
No, all of them.
But you know what? But even the one that's bad still gave you 5 stars. So there's some mixed messaging happening. This one comes all the way from last January. Fantastic find. This one comes from a user on Apple called Shakespeare and Scuba Diving. I love it. Absolutely love it. To dive or not to dive? That is the question. I am thrilled to have run across this podcast. I have now listened to every episode and have learned something from each one. Steven's interviews are engaging and informative. On the rare occasion he doesn't have a guest, he explores another interesting facet of the authorship mystery. 5 stars. Thank you so much for that. Wow. Shakespeare and Scuba Diving.
20,000 leagues under the sea.
Here's one. That would be too far for scuba. I'm pretty sure scuba is just like, I don't think you can go that deep.
I don't know. I've never dived, so I snorkel. I do snorkel.
Petrified of the ocean. Absolutely petrified. I will go on a ship. I have a healthy respect. I'm fascinated by the ocean. I love ocean life. One of my greatest fears is just being in the open ocean. Like terrifying. Terrifying.
Like open ocean, I totally get that. But like even the beach, like you don't like to go swim in the ocean?
That's fine. But in the back of my mind, I think like, yep, I'm going to be the statistic. I'm the guy who gets, his ankle bitten off by a tiger shark 3 feet from shore. All right. Here's one from March 19th, 2024 from Lawls, Lawles, Lawls 3000. The title is simply Host. And it is 5 stars, like I said, but it says, love the subject. Steven, please dial back your commentary. Let the guests get on with it. The show's not about you. First episodes, your demeanor is nice and palatable. Now, too loud and over the top.
This is what happens when you get an Italian actor behind a microphone.
Listen, I got Sicilian blood. Listen, come on. We're loud people. I respect it.
Here's what I say to lols.
Yeah, just fingers cupped towards the sky. But also, thanks for the 5-star review. That was really nice of you to still give 5 stars. I'm going to argue against lols, though, and say the show is about Steve. Steve is the captain of this ship, and Steven's personality is at the forefront, my opinion, why people keep tuning in. I think that no program can be both entertainment and education without a personality. Otherwise, it's just school or it's just research. And this show isn't research. It's entertainment revolving around research and revolving around information. And I think I like you being a little bit loud. I like you being a little bit over the top because, quite frankly, if it wasn't the case, I think it would be boring. So that's
thank you, Jake. You're the producer, so
by the way,
what you say goes. But also, I think there is some value to people shouting at their headphones or their car radio or wherever it is that they're listening to the show. And if they're shouting at me, that's okay. And I always say, write it down, send us an email. Love to hear from you. If you think I'm over the top or I didn't let a guest speak enough or I talked over them or maybe I got a little too passionate because what they were saying was too exciting or I had a new idea or a lightning bolt moment. We had a whole episode about lightning bolt moments. But love to hear from you. Want to know. Absolutely.
Here's a quick, simple one from JLW435. This was from back in February. Keep asking questions was the title. 5 stars. Who was Shakespeare? Certainly not a man whose entire family was illiterate. Short and sweet and right to the point.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really sweet one here from Quell the Bell, which is a name that we've heard before.
Yes, indeed. I think so.
I don't think we've read this review because this review came in after our last anniversary show. So maybe we know the name from Twitter or
it's
from
possible
emails or
that
something.
Quell the Bell wrote a review at a different streaming service in the past before a previous anniversary show.
Well, this one was from right after our anniversary show last year. And the title is Fledgling Oxfordian here. One of my favorite topics to learn about. My old grandma brain can keep up with the discussions, and I love to talk about it. Always new and fascinating interviews. The episode with Dorothea Dickerman about the women in Oxford's lives and where they appear in his poems and plays was fabulous. Lots about his biography, too. I got started on this topic by reading Shakespeare by Another Name by Mark Anderson, and have been fascinated ever since. A great detective story by scholars using their research on literature, history, and theater to expose the great author. 5 stars.
And
That's
speaking of Mark Anderson, Shakespeare by Another Name, I think you'll see that book somewhere right in this portion behind me of the bookshelf. But I also have 3 additional copies because when I find them used online, I snatch them up and I keep them and I give them as gifts to people who are interested in this topic or who learn about the podcast or actors who work with me on stage. And I get to talking about it and I go, here, you need this book.
Is that why I can never find them? Because you're always getting them before I do?
Probably. I'm snatching them all up.
Great. Hopefully one day I'll get one of those gifts, apparently, since I can't find it anywhere. Here's one from Crazy KGM. Good stuff. Looking forward to a new season. This was right after our last one as well. Our last anniversary show. Really liked the thoughtful arguments and interesting guests. The myth of the man from Stratford always rang hollow to me with its reliance on must have and could have. And now I know why. That's fantastic. Here's the last one here. Open Forum Shakespeare Authorship is the title. This show is an entertaining and accessible place for open-minded consideration of Shakespeare, the works, and how they were created. Stephen is a passionate, accomplished Shakespearean whose love of the plays and poems directs him to keep his show dedicated to welcoming all comers to the mystery of how exactly the works were created. His dedicated belief that Edward de Vere wrote the canon is well represented by his most accomplished guests, but it does not prevent research into other candidates or theories from appearing. It's a thrill to get caught up in new theories that threaten to overturn understandings. After years of listening, I've come to my own thoughts on the matter and yet thirst for more. The question leads to an endless supply of questions. Keep asking them. That is a fantastic review.
Wow,
5 stars.
that's
Thank you so much.
Wow, that's
really well written and concise and really sweet.
And it's so accurate about what we strive to do here. And in fact, that chokes me up a bit because it's so true. And I have suffered attacks from those who say that I shouldn't provide a forum to different viewpoints or different candidates or people who maybe have a fringe theory or even an outlandish idea about all of this. But I've never taken that position and I won't. And I think that that's very humbling that the reviewer wrote that, yes, Oxford is very well represented. And I don't hide how I feel and what I think and what I believe, but it also doesn't cause me to shut others down or to close them out of this forum. I believe, and I will always say this forever, as long as this show exists, every stone is worth turning over more than once.
Right.
And unfortunately, there are those who believe, well, we already looked under that rock. There's nothing to be found there. Yeah, but you're claiming then that your vision of what you saw under the rock is the only vision worth contemplating. And that in itself is just so arrogant. Yeah, I already researched that. There's nothing to be found there. Well, wait a minute. Everyone needs an editor. Everyone needs a second set of eyes on everything they write. You and I were just talking about this before we went live about, there's that typo that I didn't catch until right now that I've already published it. Yeah. So what makes you believe that you're some authority that if you turned over the rock and didn't find any bugs worthy of examining, that somebody else isn't going to? Shame on you. Right. And you start to sound so Stratfordian when you talk that way. And that always has ruffled my feathers and bristled me in ways that I just cannot describe.
Yeah. It is the tactic of somebody with a straw man argument to not hear anything against said argument. And I feel like as much as people like to take this incredibly seriously, because it is an important part of humanity, the authorship mystery isn't life or death. if you want to shut out, people in like social issues that have a specific view that is detrimental to the safety of people, that's one thing, right? There's a level of like, I'm not going to give this person a platform because what they're saying is dangerous. There's no danger to be done by talking about the Shakespeare mystery. Now, that might be sacrilegious to some of the listeners, and I apologize, but like at the end of the day, this is fascinating and it's important, but it's not deadly,
Well, and I suppose that's one, definitely one way of looking at it. But one thing I will tell listeners is coming up in this season, we will do some more exploration into Marlowe's connection to the works. We will be revisiting the North theory, because that seems to have been gaining some traction in certain circles. And so it's worth re-examining and trying to determine what can truly be found there. And any other guests, future guests, potential guests out there who have research or theories they'd like to share, you know where to find me. Contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. And we'd love to explore with you what rocks you're turning over. Jake, one of the comments that I'd like to share that I received not too long ago, based on a previous episode that we did with author Peter Derbyshire. And he writes, I just wanted to say thanks again for the great conversation on the podcast. I listened to it this morning and quite enjoyed it the second time around. And now I'm researching John Dee. And if you remember from listening to that episode, I introduced him to the concept of who John Dee is. And I said, well, that would make a great character in one of your future books. And so it looks like Peter has taken the bait.
There we go.
And is moving along with that. All
it takes is just putting a little note in the Notes app on your phone and then revisiting it a couple days later and going, you know what? There's something there.
Yeah, and we also received a really nice complimentary email and thank you from the publicist of River Street Writing, who is his publisher. And so Hole was very nice to send a message as well. But
I do want to say before you move on, I want to say that Hole signed their email with oodles of admiration.
Yeah, she did.
And that is a beautiful turn of phrase. That is a fantastic phrase. It just rolls off the tongue. I will be stealing that. Oodles of admiration.
Okay. I'm sure Hole would be fine with you taking that. We mentioned Jen Swan. She sent me some links to some guy who does some YouTube videos about how to teach certain Shakespeare plays. And I wanted to mention to Jen that those were fun. The Romeo and Juliet was a lot of fun. Thanks for that. I love when you guys send me links to fun stuff, interesting YouTube videos you found, research that you've discovered, images of old newspaper articles or paintings that have intrigued you. So please continue to do that. But I do want to draw some attention to Frank Lawler, bringing him back up again, because he sent me this. I don't get one of these very often, but he said, have you ever heard of the No Proscenium podcast? And he said that the host of that, whose name is Noah Nelson, and I are vocal doppelgangers, he said. And I just wanted to say, Frank, I listened to Noah for a bit, and I agree that our vocal tonality is similar, but our tone, our inflections, our speaking styles are completely different. I even had my wife, Annie, listen, and she was like, yeah, it sort of sounds like you, but he doesn't talk like you. If that makes sense. And I think that speaking styles, inflections, choices that are made, obviously Noah Nelson isn't a trained Shakespearean actor, but I can tell you that when you've been speaking, when you've been reciting Shakespeare for more than 30 years, it does change the way you speak.
Yeah, it ruins you. Completely ruins you. I don't suggest anybody do it. It makes it really hard. Because you're constantly speaking in like strange phrases. I never understand what you're trying to say. It's really complicating.
You start throwing words out like impetus.
Yeah, seriously. I would love to hear the two of you talk together. I wonder if like the world would implode if both voices. It would be impossible to follow, apparently.
I don't know.
In between, before you said anything, you had to be like, okay, this is Steven, and I'm going to say, okay, yes, this is Noah, and now I'm going to say.
Have you listened? Do you know who? Do you
no,
know?
But my interest is peaked now. I'm going to.
Okay, now you're going to go do a little no proscenium search.
I want to give just a quick little shout out to those listeners who are listening to us on Spotify. Again, there are tons of ways to listen to the show. I would argue too many. Apple, YouTube, Spotify, through the website itself. I mean, like there are endless ways. Stitcher, although Stitcher might be now Stitcher Premium. That might be behind a paywall. I'm not sure. Anyways, Spotify does have episodic comments similar to like a YouTube. It's not super frequented because I don't think most people interact with Spotify. When you're on Spotify, you don't think like, let me write something on this. So
sure.
It's not a common thing, but it is available. And once again, this one comes from our last anniversary episode. This is a comment on the episode. Technically, it falls in the category of us talking about it now. This one came from Dexter Moonbeam. Congrats to Stephen and Jake for making to this milestone. The show and the guests are very diverse. It's a non-denominational podcast, and all Shakespeare points of view are given voice. This one comes from Clare. I wonder if this is Quill or Clare. I'm not sure. This was from the Shakespeare Muses, A Measure for the Ladies, which we just spoke about episode. They wrote, absolutely brilliant. Please come back and go through each play. I learned so much in this episode. So they want every single play we want to go through.
Okay, every play from the ladies' perspective.
Yes. And the last episode to get a couple of responses here was from Shakespeare, creator of Freemasonry. This one comes from Blair. It says, oh man, so cool. Such a delight to discover each new episode. Thank you, Stephen, for your unending passion to explore the Deverian universe.
I think that's probably Blair Murphy that we were just talking about earlier.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm going to guess, yeah.
And the last one from same episode here comes from K-Man with 2 N's. Love this episode. It's a nice change of pace from the usual lively discussions, which always feel like I'm in on the conversation. So they paid you 2 compliments, 2 different sides of the same coin, compliment coin.
Well, that's incredible because I remember, Jake, when we first were putting this all together, and we had many conversations together about the flavor of the episodes, the conversational style that was required, how it needed to come across as very informal and casual and not like an interview, like a journalist asking questions of the guest type of thing, but more conversational in style. And that was something that was super important to you that you basically beat me over the head with over and over again for a while. And it rings so true, and it's so important. And one of the things that you'll always, those of you who are listening, you'll always hear me say over and over again, things like, thank you for listening, and thank you for allowing me into your space, whatever that space is, because I understand that there are so many choices that you have of what to do with your time and how to spend that time and what podcasts you want to listen to and what YouTubes you want to watch. And obviously the YouTube format tends to lend itself to more comments because most people are watching it on their computer or something that has a keypad available to them to write comments as opposed to like Spotify or Apple or whatever. But just thank you all for supporting the program, for enjoying what we do, for your kind words about the work that we do. And Jake, of course, mostly behind the scenes, but we love to have him come here with us every once in a while to share his part of it all. And again, I know Jake says this all the time, and I say this too. We couldn't do it without you. We wouldn't do it without you, but we're so glad to do it with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the things that I have done with Dragon Wagon Radio as a podcast network versus just having every show be its own little island, I do truly try to create community. That's my goal with Dragon Wagon. And I understand that because of the nature of Don't Quill, it's not necessarily going to be, everybody's cup of tea and vice versa for other shows on the network. But I do feel like even within the Quillers themselves, like creating a place on the Patreon where people can connect. The fact that in our chat here, Daniel Cowan And I believe it was Kara just realized that they had met a year ago at a conference in our chat and were saying hi to each other after not seeing each other since then. Like that's what it's all about. I really love the idea of fostering a community of some sort, talking about the things that we are passionate about. In this instance, the authorship mystery is the thing, but at the core, it is also about the people. Like I love the fact that we have familiar names, that we have regulars, that we know a little bit about some of the people who tuned into the program. And there are, I think that 6 years in now, we've got to the point where like some of our listeners are characters in the Don't Quill the universe. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like Don't Quill the podcast universe. And that's my favorite thing. And that's another reason why I want things to feel more conversational. I like it when things are really accessible because I want our listeners to feel like they are part of what we are doing and that it isn't a one-way closed circuit television, you know?
Well, and one of the best compliments that I receive from guests is they always tell me, and there's some emails too that came through from different guests who always talk about how comfortable they felt, how at ease they felt, how the conversation just flowed, how an hour flew by and they didn't even realize.
Right.
And one of the things that I pride myself on that I'm so excited about, and one of the reasons I mentioned Peter with the John D issue is nearly every guest, I have some sort of an idea that pops up in talking to them that I say, oh, what do you think about this idea? Or how about this for your next project? Or can you work on that for the future? And oftentimes they will. They'll take it and run with it. And so I kind of feel like I get to be a little bit of a muse sometimes and help inspire a little bit of art, a little bit of research, a little bit of fun. Who knows? And that's a really wonderful feeling when someone who is a guest, you know, hears something, some idea that we came up with together on the show and then make something out of it.
I love that. Go ahead. You got.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give a shout out to some folks who have contacted me over the last year, or including some most recent. Some have been previous guests. Some are potential return guests. Just want to let people know Charles Boynton remains very active doing his Shakespeare Readers group. He has a new series coming up on the sonnets, and I wanted to say thanks, Charles, for keeping us to date on what you're doing and for sharing the podcast with your readers group. I've been trying to get some of you, I'm sure, be interested to know, I'm trying to get Bill Boyle to come back on as a guest for another episode. Obviously, he's a big proponent of the succession theory, and we've been trying to work out a date. I've been working on getting Rima Greenhill to come on and talk about her book about Elizabeth and Ivan the Terrible. I reached out to Richard Vaughan Davies, who's the author of In the Shadow of Shakespeare. But he's been so attacked by the establishment that he's pretty much given up on promoting his own book. And that's a sad
that is so
state
sad.
of things. But his thesis is that De Vere worked with Shaxper of Stratford and became so utterly infatuated with him, and that they developed this homosexual relationship that it was De Vere who wanted to immortalize the name William Shakespeare in order to bring lifelong attention to the god of his idolatry, as it were, which is really interesting theory we haven't really touched a lot on. So I'm hoping that Richard will reconsider and come on the program. But, you know, one of the things I have to tell you is that there are folks out there who are reticent to be a guest. I tried to get Scott McCrae to come on, and he basically said 15 years ago I would have loved to come on, but now it's beyond me. I'm not interested. So the point is that behind the scenes, we're working all the time to try to bring you new guests and to explore new theories. But there's some real, like I said, hesitancy out there from certain folks who are either afraid of being attacked or have been attacked and don't want to suffer any further at the hands.
So silly. It's infuriating because it's all just so silly to me.
the magnificent Luis Souza, who's been a guest a couple of times, who was attacked on an episode of the Blue Boring Tavern because he came on my show and talked about some of his theories. Again, it's the dysfunction that happens where you see sleuths attacking sleuths. That's not what we're about. It shouldn't be what we're about. But I have convinced Luis, based on some previous episodes that we did, and now giving him some encouragement, he's going to come on. He wants to share his position on where he believes the name William Shakespeare actually derives from. Why that pen name? Why did Edward de Vere choose that pseudonym? I think that's going to be a fabulous episode for the future.
I want to say Cara Elizabeth Martin in the chat, with some brilliance, A+ gold star, Cara Elizabeth Martin. What if they come on with that voice masking thing, like Unsolved Mysteries from the 80s, right? I just want to say I can do that. We have that technology. You can have a guest on, you can never say their name. We can mask their voice. They can have that
blur.
weird, I mean, it's on video, it's all audio. They don't even need to blur. It's just it's that like sort of like when I was well, it's that sort of like wonky, listen, we can make it happen.
I don't know that we need the adults from Charlie Brown cartoons on the episode though. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that's exactly what we're going for.
We can pitch, or we pitch them up and make them sound like chipmunks.
To touch just one more time, Jake, though, about like the informal conversational style, some guests won't come on unless I give them questions ahead of time to prepare for. And I try to tell them that that's so antithetical to what we do, that's not the point. That's not what we do. Like, here's some themes, some ideas we'll talk about. But a Q&A is not what we're doing. It's a conversation. We're just going to chat and talk about your work. Sometimes I don't even know where the conversation is going to go. It just takes a nice turn. And I start asking them about, well, how hard was that to do? Or how much work did that require? Or what were the greatest obstacles that you found? Or who knows? I don't like to be pinned down to, well, here are the set questions. You're not a presidential candidate. This isn't 60 Minutes. Right. It's Don't Quill the Messenger.
That's what that lends to the variety of the program as well, because there are times where I edit an episode, and this is not a slight on those guests by any means. Please don't take it that way. But there are times where I get the audio files and I look at it, and it's like, I could see where you clearly asked a question or said something, and then it's like 15 solid minutes of their wavelength. And then like you said one thing and then another 15 solid, and it's like, oh, Stephen had 3 questions and the other person, and that's great. And those are, I'm sure, fantastic episodes filled with information, and the people are clearly speaking because they have strong opinions on something and have either have the knowledge or have prepared those. But that also doesn't need to be every episode. And so there are the fact that some are a little bit more meandery, and that some, you might bring somebody on to talk about something, and they might mention, oh yeah, we went to Italy for something. And then wait a minute, hang on a second. When you went to Italy, did you do A, B, or C? And then all of a sudden you have this whole other topic that you find yourself on. That's what I'm talking about, about like the people. Like, I like that our show isn't just about the mystery. It's about the people. It's about all of us as individuals within the mystery, and our opinions of it, our human experience within the mystery.
Jake, I'm sorry, but I have to call you out on what must obviously be misinformation.
What's
because according to what you just said, there are times when I actually allow guests to talk.
Yes, it's infrequent.
And that's not what we've just been hearing this whole episode. No. Apparently, I just talk over everybody and I don't let them get a word in edgewise. But you're saying that you actually have tracked it, that there are times when there's one wavelength and it's the guest speaking. Yes. And I don't say anything.
All right, now I feel like you're being a little petty now. I just want to go ahead and say that. But do you want to know? I will say I'll pull the technical curtain back a little bit, because I do think this is something that I have noticed is sometimes when I am prepping episodes and I do get the files from you, I can tell when a bad internet connection has made it so that you just realize I can't jump in because they won't hear me jump in for another 2 seconds, and they're on a train of thought, and I could watch it because I'll see you do it like 3 times. You'll try to interject, and then it won't work. And then I'll realize, oh, he gave up because he realized the internet connection.
I'm reading the internet. Is that what you're saying? It's like, oh, he's not reading the room. He's reading the internet.
Sometimes I can tell. And you know what? That's I commend that, because that's not always an easy thing to do, is to know when it's futile.
Well, sometimes I do have guests, coming in from another country, and who knows what their connection's like. And then my connection used to be real spotty. Now we've got fiber optic, high speed going on out here in the boonies.
Yeah, welcome to the year 2014.
Yes, we finally made it.
Jen Swan in the chat, and this is very fair, and we do not mean to. This is why I'm saying these episodes aren't bad, and it's all about the variety, Jen. But Jen Swan in the chat does say some folks are very introverted and really do have to prepare for what's being asked. They don't want to be caught off guard and feel stupid. And that's totally acceptable. And I think that's the goal. The goal is to ensure that nobody needs to feel that way, is the hope. We want to really push on them that, like, nobody's judging you here, at least in this space. Obviously, people are afraid of idiots on the internet, but,
sure.
Idiots on the internet, gonna idiot on internet,
But Jake, you'll remember, again, going back to the early history, you remember when we were doing episodes in your living room in Burbank, and a guest would show up, and then they'd want to start talking and chatting about what we were going to talk and chat about. And you would almost always, every time, you'd be like, stop,
save it
for on the air.
Yep.
Just sit down. Let's turn on the microphones and go.
Do you want, I have very specific instances. I'm not going to name names by any means, but there was an instance where I remembered you and a guest immediately getting into something, and I'm in the room finishing my setup, and I'm fascinated. Like, you guys have captivated me because you're speaking very casually about a very interesting topic, and you're being very free with your opinions on it. And then the episode started and the papers came out and the reading. And I remember being like, wait, no, what happened to before the microphone was recording? I want just more of that. The paper, you could just put this online. I'll read it. Like, I don't need you to read it to me. Like, so yeah, I don't know. I'm getting hot and bothered here, but
guests with notes. And sometimes I'll say to a guest, I know you prepared notes, but A, we don't want to hear the paper shuffling in the background. And B, when you're reading off of the page, the listener can tell, like, the listener knows that that's what's happening. That's not a conversation. You wouldn't be sitting having a cocktail at a bar with notes, reading to the person across the table from you, and listeners can tell that. And so you've always been a big stickler about that, and I try to share that with guests. And I get it. As Jen says, yes, there's some people who are very nervous, very introverted. Sometimes we do get guests who are very scholarly, and they want to make sure they don't make a single mistake, that they cite every reference, that they don't get any dates wrong. And oftentimes I'll get an email from a guest after an episode's been recorded and going, can you change what I said there? I mentioned 1582 and I really meant 1588. I'm like, nobody cares. Like, the audience, if the audience is getting on you about a mistake that was made in a conversation, then that's not our audience. That's not who the Quiller Nation really is. It's just, that's not who we are.
Well, Stephen, we should probably wrap this up.
Yes, indeed.
I want to say once again a huge thank you to those of us who joined us live here. This was really fun. I really enjoyed having the chat to look at and hearing the people's opinions and the fact that they're having conversations amongst themselves that have nothing to do with us. I really like that. They're talking about who would be more good guests, and they're talking about their opinions on people, and I love to see that. We'll definitely try to do another one of these, before next year's anniversary.
Yes.
In fact, maybe if we do the episode that I'm talking about, a sort of a new 101 or a sort of, the layman's mystery, maybe a video version of that would be a good thing to have, because then we can just put that, for free online, and maybe it'll help get people to tune into the podcast. So maybe we do that this way. But once again, thank you so much to those of you who joined us live. And I want to thank everybody who continues to support the show in the myriad of ways. If you've left a review, thank you so much for leaving those reviews. They're incredibly helpful. You can leave a review once again on iTunes, and you can leave a rating on Spotify. You can't write a review on Spotify, you can respond to episodes like we were reading. But when it comes to the overall show, you can still give it a rating. You can still give it a 5-star, rating there. Checking out the shop is a fantastic way to support the show. There's a ton of really great stuff over at don'tquillthepodcast.com. You can click the shop button there. We have really nice mugs, really well made, good quality. Look at how deep that is. That's a big, deep coffee mug right there. Great shirts. We've got hats. We've got phone cases. I just updated. Somebody wrote us an email and was like, "Hey, I have the latest iPhone, but you only have the second to latest." And I went, "Oh no!" And so now we have the brand new iPhone 16 and the Galaxy. I think it's S24 maybe is the most recent one. I can't.
I think you're right.
But we have all that stuff is available there. Merchandise, it seems futile in 2024, but it really goes a long way to help. Not only is it a couple extra bucks, we don't make a ton of money on merch. We don't keep inventory. Everything is a print to order, that kind of stuff. But it throws us a couple bucks, but also it's conversation pieces. Like when I wear this out in public, this shirt that I'm on, like people are constantly like, "What's on your shirt? What is that?" And it's immediately every time it's like, "Well, what do you know about Shakespeare?" And it's just a great way to spark conversation. Again, it's just another tool in helping spread the word. And
I have some travel coming up, and I always wear my Don't Quill the Messenger merchandise when I'm in the airport. And inevitably someone, whether I'm standing in line at TSA or I'm sitting waiting to get on the plane, or they saw me walk down the aisle to my seat, inevitably someone will ask me about it. Like, what is that? What does that mean? What is that symbol? The one that I wear most often is the one that has the 4 truths.
My facts t-shirt.
Yes. That's a really popular one. Bats can see. Frankenstein is the doctor's name. Yes. That one. Yeah.
The earth is round.
Edward de Vere was Shakespeare.
Right. Which again, listen, it's a strong stance, that t-shirt specifically. I know that we talk about how we're open to all the ideas here, but at the end of the day, listen, you want to sell a t-shirt every now and then. You got to take a hard stance. But yeah, I love that shirt.
I will say, I'm going to put you on the spot right now because I have asked now, Jake, multiple times, and I want Quiller merchandise. I want a shirt that says "I'm a Quiller."
Oh, okay.
Or Quiller Nation, or something.
That I can promise. I hear you at the end of episodes saying, "Oh, I'm going to have him do this, and I put the kibosh on that, and I edit it out of the show every time because I'm not gonna do all that extra work without knowing for a fact. Listen, we need some assurance, but that is an easy one. And to be perfectly honest with you, I actually already have a Quiller design that I made ages ago that I need to kind of revisit and tweak. Yes, but by this time next year, guaranteed, a lot sooner than that, we'll have a Quiller. I like the idea of Quiller, just Quiller. I like the idea that it says Quiller. So we'll make a Quiller shirt.
We need some Quiller merchandise.
Quiller shirt and a Quiller mug and maybe a Quiller hat. The sort of things that you would put that on.
Join the Quiller Nation.
But so I was in the process of thanking all the things: the reviewers, the shoppers, the live stream joiners, and the patrons. Thank you so much. If you're listening to this live, if you're watching us right now, it's because you went through the Patreon. Obviously, we did not put this live stream behind a paywall, so those watching here don't necessarily, they're not necessarily contributing in any way financially to the program. But we don't have ads. We don't have financial backers. We don't have beneficiaries of this program. We make the show for you, and it's like PBS, made possible by listeners like you. So your patron dollars are what keep us being able to continue to make this program and to continue to evolve it. They're what allow me to make new designs, to spend time meticulously graphic designing items and ensuring that everything runs as smoothly, as slickly, and as professional as possible. And so your Patreon dollars, man, they mean the world to us. We really, really appreciate everybody who's on there. If you are listening to this in the pod feed, you didn't join us live, you listen to this pod feed, and you haven't checked out Patreon, or maybe it sounds daunting, it sounds like it's too much, or you're not the sort of person who kind of interacts with things online that way, I assure you, it is incredibly simple. It is incredibly easy, and there is so much material available to you there, all at patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger. Patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger. There is no apostrophe in don't because it's a URL and you can't do that. I always feel like we never say that, and I assume people know, but every now and then I get afraid that people are writing it with the apostrophe and don't. So
I can't find you. What's going on?
We should have named it "Do Not Quill the Messenger." What's wrong with us? But again, Patreon, it's the best way to support the show, and it doesn't take much. Obviously, as much as you're willing is great, but even a few bucks a month for less a month than like your basic latte at a Starbucks. And, you help us keep doing what we do.
Well, thank you, Jake. We appreciate it. We appreciate being a part of the Dragon Wagon Radio Network and that network of fine shows. And again, if you haven't checked out some of the other podcasts that Jake curates, you should do that because you might find something else intriguing and interesting that you'd like to listen to and enjoy.
There's a huge library that there aren't as many active podcasts at once as there tend to be, but there's always something coming and going, and the entire library of tons of shows. There's shows about mental health. There's shows about the human experience. We have shows about mythology. There's shows about pop culture. All sorts of stuff available over on the Patreon. If you're a fan of adventure fiction, I will take this opportunity to plug one of my favorite programs on the network, Dungeons and Dragon Wagon, which is myself and some other hosts of different Dragon Wagon shows playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, but it is recorded and edited to sound like a radio drama. So you're not going to be listening to like a bunch of people just talking with each other over a table. It is.
You scored an 18 with your +5 Blade of Reaping.
There are rolls, but it's not. We don't get into that. We don't get into the math. It's just simply you can tell. But the entire thing is edited and scored and sound designed. It's we say at the beginning of every episode, it's best in headphones. It's like a real fantastic like audio experience, and it starts off very silly, but when I tell you, by the time the show ends, we're crying. It's very, very, very fun. We all get very deeply into our characters. Listen, I'm literally here. I have a 3D model of my character from the show right there. That's Junk, the half-orc fighter from D&DW right there. Since we have video, I can show that. Tons of fun stuff there. But that show, by the way, D&DW, the entire show is like it's a 10 chapter, 2 episodes per chapter. So it's like a big 20 episode saga that has a beginning and middle and an end, like an actual proper end, like a movie. So you don't have to worry about starting something and then it not ending, which is a big concern with people who start things nowadays, whether it be TV shows or podcasts. But lots of fun stuff over there on Dragon Wagon Radio.
So check out the Dragon Wagon Radio library. Speaking of libraries, don't forget there's an entire library of bonus feature episodes available for this podcast at the Patreon page as well. And you can unlock that library by becoming a serial quiller or above at the Patreon page, patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger. Thank you so much for joining us live. And those of you who didn't, you missed out on this historic 6th anniversary episode, but that's okay. There are many more episodes to come as we embark upon our 7th Lucky 7 season.
Absolutely. And listen, it wouldn't be a live stream without an appearance by one of the pod dogs. Here's Bookstore Brown is his name. Hi, Bookstore. You have anything to say to the Quiller Nation? No, can you bark out, keep asking questions? No, you can't bark that out? All right, I tried.
That's okay. I can. Ladies and gentlemen, till we see you next time, keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.